See? I'm getting it. I suck so much dick on a daily basis, it ain't even fucking funny. Alright, now that I've got your attention, welcome everybody to the next annual installment of Exro rambles on for 40 fucking minutes talking about dick. Now, since it's that time of year, since it's the spooky seasons where we draw dicks on pumpkins to celebrate, I think it's about time that I pay my due, pay my respects to the cool air, and finally make a Halloween special. Now, I know I don't do this often, but I figure if I'm gonna make any holiday special, I might as well do it with something that I passionately and deeply care about. And of course, there's no better way to start off that trend than by talking about dolls that swear and kill people. Whenever it comes to Halloween, typically you have, you know, the big, beefy boys dominating the market. You know, you have Jason Voorhees, you have Freddie Mercury, you know, all those iconic slashers. But out of the most popular iconic slashers, Chucky always seems to get the shorter end of the stick, which I feel the character owes a little more respect than that, given that he's terrified entire generations of children away from inanimate objects that literally shit themselves. Half of the reason for that being because the first movie came out in 1988, whenever the horror slasher genre was on its way out, but in either case, I think it's finally time that we fans of the Chucky franchise take a stand and finally admit our deep love for this cussin' son of a bitch. Now, if you've seen my Kill Bill video, which may or may not be out by the time I upload this, I have no fucking idea. You'll notice how in that video I sort of slumped the two films together and I talked about what I loved about them, you know, what worked, so on and so forth. Well, to juxtapose that, I am, in this episode, going to be talking about the first three Child's Play trilogy in order, and I'm going to talk about what I like, what I don't like, and there's a particular reason for that. It's actually the biggest appeal of Child's Play in my eyes. That is, an overall horror concept that drives the film throughout the duration of its run. Now, obviously, every horror movie has a horror concept. It's just like a plot point, you know? It's the thing that literally drives the movie. But what makes the Child's Play trilogy so enticing and stand out much more than the other films is how within almost every movie of this original trilogy, the horror concepts continue to evolve, and with that, the character motivations evolve, the character relationships evolve, so on and so forth. And I guess it is this part where we start transitioning over to the first Child's Play. '88 presents us with the first feature-length film that Chucky stars in, also called Child's Play. Not the 2019 one. That one sucks ass, but I'll talk about that one at another time. Now, to reinvigorate the topic of horror concepts, now that we are now diving into the first film, really the first horror concept introduced throughout this series is the idea of if Chucky is an actual doll or if it's all in the kid's head. Very Twilight Zone-esque, of course. Right off the bat, we already have a really effective horror concept going on for us since, you know, children have very active imaginations, and throughout the film, you know, about the first half of the film, it very strongly sets up a case of mystery and vagueness, which that's one of the reasons why it kind of works. However, the one place it truly fails and kind of reveals it is in the very first scene alone. The first scene showcases Charles Lee Ray transferring a soul into the body via voodoo, which sets up good context for the character and how everything sets into place. However, kind of ruins this first horror concept right off the bat just because of that, and therefore this admittedly cool concept and idea doesn't get enough screen time for it to be very significant to the viewer. Thankfully, there are two things that save this failure to adhere to this concept. You could say, in a sense, that there is a backup horror concept, that being when everyone else is going to find out that the doll is real. Here's the thing. Since they inadvertently reveal Chucky's origins very early on in the story, and we therefore already know that Chucky is a very real doll, they instead attempt to save the film by a secondary horror concept that they introduce halfway through the film. Now that we, the audience, are aware that Chucky is a very real individual and that these people are in very real danger, the issue is, when do the people themselves find out that Chucky is very real? When the mom finds out, how she convinced the detective. When the detective finds out, how's he convinced the cops, so on and so forth. And eventually it escalates to this boiling point that is the climax of the movie, which is honestly one of my favorite parts of this movie, but I'll get to that one in a second. Something that makes Chucky really important and significant as a horror icon has a lot to do with Uncanny Valley and how real the world feels. The movie doesn't waste any time establishing our main characters. Right off the bat, it establishes that the mother is a very middle-class mother who's struggling for a living to make her child happy in this, in this like 2-bedroom apartment. That's a very real and relatable issue that a lot of people have, and that's what makes such previously mentioned horror concepts work so well. And that's what makes Chucky so effective. It's the fact that these were previously normal, everyday human beings with normal, everyday problems, and that's how they got struck with it. In a lot of other movies, such as the Friday the 13th series, usually characters have to go out of their way to immerse themselves in an environment, and that's how they get killed. But for Chucky, he can literally pop out of nowhere. He's just casually there, and that setting is what works so goddamn well. The characters are very grounded, and it's very real. So on top of it just making it scarier in the sense that this could happen to me too, on top of that, it really just gives the world a good sense of reality. Even despite the goofy voodoo shit that doesn't get much explanation, the relationship with Andy and his mother, that shit feels real. Hell, the child actor for Andy is actually very talented in certain scenes. Like, he's not the best, granted. He's pretty much just there to play the cute kid, but, for instance, like, a scene like whenever he's stuck in the hospital and Chucky's following after him, he starts crying, and he's like, I was actually really surprised, because there's fucking adult actors who are like in their 20s and 30s. They still can't make themselves cry, even though that's like their one job. And then here comes this 4-year-old who probably didn't even get paid. Something else that doesn't really adhere to modern horror tropes or just classical horror tropes is the setting itself. As I said, because of the casual setting, it's a lot more scary because it feels a lot more relatable. However, this also introduces something entirely new. You see, horror mascots like Jason or Michael Myers, all these other people, they work best within open, woody settings. Hell, even for modern horror icons like Slenderman, like, they work best in the woods, in these open, like, maze-like settings. But for a character like Chucky, his ability to manipulate his environment around him in such condensed space is what makes these movies so suspenseful when it comes down to the set pieces themselves. The tighter the space is for Chucky usually means the better the location is. I guess in that regard, he's a complete antithesis to a lot of the other, a lot of the established horror icons by the time the first movie came out, but this is something that the series really continued to capitalize on for as long as they could, up until I guess they just forgot that the setting is actually one of the most important parts of a horror movie, and in Child's Play 3, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, alright? I'm almost there. Finally, the last thing I want to say about Child's Play 1 is it's just really solid filmmaking. Like, there is a very concrete and real reason why this is a lot of people's favorite movie. This is probably the film out of all of them that has the most solid filmmaking. It's because the first Child's Play movie wasn't aiming to be a slasher movie, it was aiming to be a movie, like a real movie, with real consequences and real characters. Granted, there are some cliches where that kind of falls apart, such as like just the smaller things you'll see in slasher movies in general, like why doesn't she throw the doll in the fire? Why is Andy able to get on a bus perfectly fine? Is this bus driver secretly a sociopath? Uh-oh, someone's getting an exposed video. Just smaller things like that, you know? But the film itself, like for every weird or questionable scene, there's an equally amazing scene, or just smaller detail. For instance, it's explained throughout the movie, or at least in one particular scene, that the more Charles lives out his life in the body, the more human he becomes. One of the smallest details that is never said directly, but is something I noticed on my own terms, is as the movie progresses throughout, the doll becomes uglier, and it is so fucking cool. I love small shit like that, because when the puzzle pieces finally come together, it's so fucking cool, and this is no exception. Like, that is genuinely one of the coolest things I have ever seen in a movie, in a horror movie to be more exact, just because it's such a minute detail that no one's gonna notice it the first time until it's pointed out, and then an aha moment clicks. Or even the scene where Chucky finally reveals himself to the mother with the battery scene. Like, that battery scene is genuinely one of my favorite scenes in any horror movie. These first two films have a great sense of suspense, and I really like that a lot. Something else that's interesting about the behind the scenes for this movie is they were really dedicated to making Chucky feel alive, and because of that, there were certain scenes more towards the end of the movie where they had to get a midget in a suit to maneuver really quickly. So in order to make it feel real without having like a midget in this like actual set where there's like this contrast of the doll version and the much bigger midget version, they literally remake the entire sets. They make every object in the room like 8 inches bigger or something like that, a certain amount bigger, maybe even fucking 4 feet, I don't even remember, but it's really cool, and the fact that they went out of their way to do something like that is honestly really cool, because I've never heard anyone else, any other filmmaker being that dedicated to bringing this inanimate object to life. And then lastly, the animatronic work, while being slightly dated, is honestly very good looking. To this day, it's still pretty convincing. I think one of my favorite parts with the animatronic work is just that one shot where Chucky's burnt to shit.
Hello, Andy.
You can tell the filmmakers were really passionate about putting this project together and doing it correctly, and it just makes for a really solid horror classic. I would greatly recommend the first Child's Play movie. On to the next one! Now, before I talk about Child's Play 2, I'm going to preface this by saying Child's Play 2 is my personal favorite. And it's honestly, for a lot of Chucky fans in particular, it's their favorites too. For people who like the Child's Play trilogy specifically, Child's Play 1 is usually their favorite. But for people who like the character of Chucky specifically, well, this is usually their movie, you know? And it makes sense too. This is the film that invented the Chucky laugh. But on top of that, it also reinvents the horror concept. Now, whereas I said in the previous film that a backup horror concept was just when is everyone else gonna find out, they've moved that to the primary concerns for this movie, and because of that, they flesh out this idea a lot better than what they were able to do in the first movie. Chucky immediately, like, the second he's brought back to life, he immediately kills people. He's on a spree, and he's on a spree to find Andy and fast. Now, this is an important development for a couple reasons. It expands the horror concept of when is everyone else going to find out, because by this point we already know that Chucky is a very real threat, but on top of that it also expands the character motivations. One of the things I like about Child's Play 1 is the serial killer is very inexperienced with voodoo, and because of that he suffers the consequences for his own actions, which is honestly a very, very cool, interesting thing to see. But in Child's Play 2, now that he's aware of these consequences, he immediately wakes back up and he is on the fucking hunt right off the get-go. Interestingly enough, leads to him succeeding in performing the transfer, but he doesn't actually transfer himself, so Oops. In either case, this is just a natural progression of character intentions while also corresponding with the main franchise's set goal that it's set in place since the beginning of the very first movie. Everything feels like a natural evolution of the first movie, and honestly, that's what a sequel can ask for. A sequel exceeds best whenever it builds upon the best aspects of the first movie and even the worst aspects when it improves those. Like I said before, this is where Chucky as a character gets explored a lot more. He's better. Brad Dourif really sets a presence in this role, and like he was pretty good in the first movie, but he only had a couple minutes of screen time to really talk and show off Chucky as a character. In this movie, he goes full out, and it is goddamn beautiful. This is where like some of the best one-liners come in. This is where like I said, the Chucky laugh's invented. This is where everything just starts to fall into place, and Chucky as a iconic slasher villain, really, this is where every trait that he's known for comes from, this one movie. Another amazing thing about this movie is the environment. While the first movie's environment was set in a condensed setting with, it was just like a 2-bedroom apartment, like 1 bathroom, so on and so forth. This one opens it up a little bit more, but I'd actually say that this as a setting is a lot more intimidating, because while it does open up the space a lot more, it puts a lot more junk in it for Chucky to manipulate. And I'd argue that a serial killer's ability to manipulate the environment around what they are built upon is the best strength that a horror movie can ask for, because the setting is one of the most vital aspects to any horror movie, in all honesty. Setting is immensely important, and it pretty much determines how the killer toys with their victims. It's also because of this that it works more environmentally, because Andy is first getting introduced into this foster home's house. It's not really his home. He's not comfortable in it, he doesn't feel familiar with it at all. That's exactly what makes this the perfect set and the perfect evolution from the first movie. Honestly, I can't think of a single set throughout the rest of the series that is nearly as good as the Child's Play 2 setting. And of course, Chucky explores in it a little bit. Like, one of my favorite kills in the whole movie is whenever he just fucking beats the shit out of a teacher with a ruler. It's fucking ridiculous. They definitely get a lot more campy with this one, but it's fun. I guess since a lot of the good aspects of this series carries over into the second movie, such as good characters, good environment, so on and so forth, I guess I'll just go ahead and dive into specific scenes that I fucking love. Phil's death scene is probably my favorite death scene in the entire series, just because, for one, Phil's an asshole. No one likes Phil. I've never even met a Phil in real life that I've ever trusted. So, there you fucking go. Fuck you, Phil. If you're subscribed and your name's Phil, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. It's not your fault that your parents named you after a cunt. Another one of my favorite things is this, like, POV shot. It kind of emulates the first movie, like, whenever Chucky's finding instruments to kill people with. Andy's doing a similar thing, but to kill Chucky with. That's actually the scene leading up to Phil's death. I like the character of Kyle in this. I don't know why. I think it's just because Kyle is very much a fuck you character, which leads to one of my favorite moments whenever the cops pulled them aside and it's like,
what the hell's that?
You seen dolls that pee? This one bleeds.
Everything in this film is shot at kind of like a low angle. I'm assuming it's to give more of the perspective from Andy's side of it, because the movie focuses on Andy's relationship with Chucky a lot more than the other one did. A favorite scene of mine is the trash can scene, which kind of parallels with the battery scene from the first movie. Basically, Andy's sent to be interrogated by police officers. Kyle... oh, fuck me. Kyle is just kind of on the swing smoking a cigarette and then just like swinging on it just to kill some nerves, and then finally she kicks up Tommy's corpse. Tommy being the original doll that was in the building before Chucky took the place, which, by the way, that's a really good setup actually. I like that. I honestly think it's a better setup than the battery scene, but I still like the battery scene more because I'm a little bitch. And then finally realizing that the Chucky doll that she put in the trash can isn't there no more. And this pretty much leads to her confrontation with Chucky, which doesn't go as she planned, but, you know, made for that one Chucky one-liner. You goddamn women drivers! You know the one. And then the final sequence in this movie, the whole factory sequence, I just love it so much. It's a really interesting setting. It's very maze-like, and it opens up the space just enough to where Chucky's able to manipulate the environment a little better, but it doesn't really work out in his favor, now does it? Now here's another concept I didn't talk about with the first movie. Unlike other slasher films, one of the best parts about Chucky movies is how fucked up he gets by the end of the movie. In the first movie, he got burnt to shit, he got his limbs shot off individually, you know, and you have to realize, he felt every bit of that. But in Child's Play 2, they amp it up to 1,000, you know? He's fucking, he gets his shit, like, his fucking balls nailed down, gets his legs cut off, he has to stick a fucking blade in his hand, and then finally, my favorite one is whenever he gets fucking plastered with plastic. The reason being because, you know, his voodoo didn't work, he's still in the Chucky body, and that's like the first time where he's actually able to kill Andy, which is another interesting thing. He can't quite kill Andy throughout these movies because he needs Andy to body. However, once he finds out it's too late and he's stuck in the body, he's just dead set on killing the fuck out of this poor little kid, and he gets his entire ass ate. It is one of my favorite sequences in the whole franchise, if not my favorite. It's a little weird, I guess, in retrospect, just because it's a convenient setting, but with that said, it's still cool. I don't give a fuck, dude. After Child's Play 2 successfully set the franchise up to where it was both a financial and critical success, kind of. You know, everything seemed to be in line for Chucky. Everything seemed like it was only smooth sailing from here. Nothing could ever go wrong. Then Child's Play 3 happens. Yeah, it's pretty good. To sum up Child's Play 3 in a nutshell, I'll take horse tranquilizers, please. Oh, fuck, I got that shit everywhere. This film's so fucking stupid. I have 2 sets of notes, one to give me a general formatting for how this should work, and then the second one that goes into detail. My formatting notes literally just says, just follow the other notes, dog. This shit sucks. Okay, so I guess, if we're gonna rip into this stupid-ass film, we should at least start off with positives, because my fucking shit of a beard is all wet. God damn it. Alright, so I will admit, even though this is the worst out of the original 3 movies, I will say this, the opening is genuinely really great. This has the best opening sequence in, maybe any of the Chucky movies. I don't know what it is. It's just really iconic and really cool. And then the first kill was pretty good too. The first kill really had a lot of suspense going for it. There was just a lot that it built up on. Overall, it's a pretty good opening sequence. That's the only good thing about it. Okay, I'm just fucking with you. See, the thing is, this movie isn't terrible, but it's fucking boring. So it's really hard to talk about the good parts of it. I guess I will say this, there are a few really iconic Chucky moments. I even like this one moment that no one else does, where the guy dies of a fucking heart attack, and Chucky's like, it's because even though it's a lame kill, it's still funny, and honestly, I'll take anything. One of the first red flags was, aging Andy up. Okay, now this isn't inherently a problem. Now, it does contrast the entire, conceptual idea of Child's Play 1 and 2 by not having a fucking child in it. But with that said, it's not the worst idea to age Andy up. You just have to play into his trauma a little bit more and make the stakes more personal. I guess before I get into the issues with the movie, I'll just say what I felt like Child's Play 3 could have been. Because if you've never seen this movie, you really should know what it should have been versus what it is, because it is one of my least favorited experiences eating popcorn in a movie full of stoners and not being high. So, in order to make aging Andy up perfectly fine, you'd have to both play into his trauma, but you'd have to give Chucky his old body back. And I say that because if Chucky has his old body back, then the stakes get a lot more personal, you know? Chucky's no longer looking to, be in Andy's body. He's looking to fucking kill Andy for revenge. And this isn't a trait that we haven't seen from Chucky before. One of the first kills he does in Child's Play 1 is just go to his partner in crime who didn't show up the night of his death and fucking kill him. You know, he takes things into his own hands if he has to. If they could have just found a way to bullshit Chucky's old body back into existence. I mean, these are slasher movies by this point. There's no reason to get real technical. It's very clear that by this point, they're not as engaged in the filmmaking aspect of it. And I know that because Child's Play 3 is a very boring film, technically speaking. So, there you go. You have a natural evolution of each character's motivation. Andy is in deep trauma for all that Chucky's put him through throughout his childhood, and Chucky just wants to kill this fucker because he put him through his own trauma. It would feel very finalized if this is where the entire series ended and if it took that route. But instead, here's where they go as far as aging Andy goes. They put Andy in a military school. Firstly, this is the biggest mistake, and this is the first mistake. I should have done it the other order, but I don't give a shit. My pants are fucking soaked right now. Now, the issue that this introduces is that Andy can't really express his trauma that well because the film is trying to juxtapose that to the trauma of being in military academy, of people ripping off your dick because you didn't brush your fucking teeth in the right order. But the thing is, that just doesn't compare to seeing your entire family get killed in front of your own eyes by a fucking doll. It does play into Andy's trauma, but it plays into it in a superficial level by just having him do the 5 million yard stare. Instead, he just does this fake ass, like, 20-yard stare, 50-yard stare, who gives a shit stare. And, everyone else in the military academy literally just act like high schoolers. Like, there is not a damn drip of suspense in this movie. It tonally contrasts everything that this movie's going for, and it just fucking fails. Another thing that they do is, instead of having it like Chucky versus Andy, what they instead do is they try to give Chucky a new body, and therefore he has a new person, like a new victim he can transfer his soul into. This comes in the form of Tyler, the mentally retarded black child from Child's Play 3. He might be a fucking idiot, and I might want to just kick him in the thighs, but, I mean, at least we got that black representation in these movies. I mean, shit, dude. And he didn't even die first. Damn, that's a first. And this is a kind of interesting setup, but the way Andy finds out that Chucky is back and he's here to seek vengeance is literally through Chucky telling him himself. Like, why? This little 2-year-old ass fucking kid with a 6-centimeter dong stopped you like 2 times before. Why are you gonna tell him when he's like 16 years old and there's guns surrounding the entire fucking facility? What the hell is wrong with you? And that's another thing. I don't like this depiction of Chucky, because throughout the movie he literally dicks around, and it's not until the very beginning and the very end of the film where he actually cares about transferring his soul into the doll, into the black boy. Throughout a lot of this movie, he's just dicking around in a military academy just cuz. I guess he forgot that the whole point of this series is because the whole reason he's still stuck in this body is because he already did that in the first movie, and he suffered the fucking consequences for it. In a nutshell, this interpretation of Chucky is just dicking around, ignoring the movie's plot until the very end. Now, this isn't the worst idea. This isn't the worst thing they could have done, especially since Chucky is a well-beloved character by this point of the franchise. But it fails because, for one, there's too far and too few Chucky moments that we're waiting on, and for two, the Chucky moments that are in this movie are just, they're a little too ridiculous for this franchise. Like, there's a scene where he kills the garbage guy in the garbage truck, and there's this giant fucking spiky thing in there that crushes up all the trash. I don't know if that's real or not, but that feels really fucking fake and goofy. There's this other scene near towards the end where he fills a bunch of the paintball guns with real ammunition, and I'm over here like, how the fuck does that even work? Like, there's some ridiculous shit in these movies, of course. Like, for instance, Child's Play 2, Andy doesn't even realize that he's tied up to a fucking bed until he wakes up. How the fuck does someone tie you up to a bed and you don't even realize it, you retard? But in this movie, it's like, okay, imagine that scene times 10. Oh, God. He wastes so much time in this movie, and the scenes that he's in, they don't really account for anything. Like, he doesn't do that much in this movie. I think one of the first things that introduced me to that flaw while I was rewatching this movie is whenever the barbershop guy finds Chucky in a little cabinet of his, and I'm over here like, why the fuck is he in there? There was no scene that showed him moving to that spot. He's literally just there cuz. Like, he went out of his way to sit in that fucking little cabinet thing just to be opened up just so he could kill the fucking barber guy. And it wasn't even that good. Like, it's an okay kill, but the human conflict is so stupidly boring. None of these characters feel real. I just don't fucking understand why they took this approach. This is like the exact opposite approach that you needed to take to end off this trilogy, and they fucking did it. That's like if Lord of the Rings, the third movie, they're like, oh man, we gotta get in these airplanes, Frodo, we're gonna suck some dick. I couldn't think of anything. This movie makes me mad. Like I said, it's not even that bad, it's just so boring. And what it eventually leads to is this whole festival sequence. Now, granted, the festival is a very interesting, like, this carnival-ass fucking place. It's an interesting setting for these characters, but even whenever they, like, adhere away from the fucking boring-ass military academy, it's still boring, because it still drags out for way too long. None of the stakes have changed by the end of the movie, really. It's just same old shit. My issue with this setting isn't just that it tonally contrasts with everything else, but Chucky can't manipulate the environment at all. He does a little bit, but he does the bare minimum with what he can do, and eventually it leads to the most over-the-top fucking sequence ever that I don't think anyone ever likes. Like, I don't see a single Chucky fan who was like, oh yeah, that paintball scene from the third movie, that was fucking cool. I'm just watching a bunch of fucking kids I don't give a shit about, who I wanted to die in the first place, just kill each other. That's not fucking Chucky, though. And, I don't know. I guess a positive is that the movie ends. For real, though, one of the positives is the finale of the film. When they're not dicking around at a festival that doesn't mean shit, they are just, I don't know, Chucky's death is good in this film, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, he doesn't get as fucked up as the first or second movie, but he gets half of his face sliced off, and that's honestly, it's a really cool design. I wish they utilized that more. There's a reason this is Brad Dourif's, like, least favorite Chucky movie. And that's saying a lot, because this is in the same series of films as Seed of Chucky. Basically, if you want to watch this movie, you can, as long as you hit me up, because I still have half of this fucking thing. I don't feel like I drank enough. Don't watch this one. This one sucks. I'm not even fucking kidding with you guys. Just don't fucking do it. In the end, despite the third movie, I still really like this trilogy. I would say watch the first two if you want to have a good Halloween. If you haven't seen it already, they're good. I hope you like this installment of Exro Eats Ass. I'll catch you all on the flip side. Did I mention I'm a lightweight?